Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. This is where we discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. Today I'm going to cover a topic, technically two topics, that I've been asked to cover for a long time and I've been saying no. One of them is covering Fanimation, the fan company that I used to work for, mainly under the umbrella of the museum as well as some consulting. And then I've also been asked time and time again to tell my side of the story as to why I no longer work for Fanimation in the museum. And I've been saying no to both of these. I didn't really feel like it was appropriate for me to cover Fanimation as a Workbench topic, with leaving some things about what happened with the museum and them unsaid. Also, I really didn't want to get into my story from the museum. I just kind of felt like it wasn't really anybody's business, but it's gotten to the point where I keep getting asked about it. And honestly, some of the rumors and some of the stories that I've heard have been pretty funny. My favorite one is that I was allegedly fired from Fanimation because I was embezzling money. That was probably my favorite, but I've heard a lot of rumors. I've never heard anything that was anywhere close to the truth. So I figured I will put that out there. We'll finally put my side of things out there, and then we will go on and cover Fanimation as a Workbench topic. So I'm going to tell the museum story first. And if you're not interested in that, you can skip ahead to about 25 minutes in. It's a rather long story, and I'm giving all the details in the history, so it's about 25 minutes. And so if you're not interested in that, go ahead and skip to the 25-minute mark, and we will talk about Fanimation as a fan company. Okay, so first a disclaimer. Everything that I'm about to say is factual and true to the best of my knowledge. Now, I'm sure everybody's heard the old adage, there's three sides to every story. My side, your side, and the truth. So somebody else may have a different version, and their version may also be true and factually correct. Only thing I'll caution is that the only people who would have a version that would be based on first-hand information would have Frampton in their name. Kim wasn't around for most of the time that I was there. He was arriving more or less as I was leaving. The other collectors that were involved, like Lewis, Chandru, etc., weren't really around. So if you're hearing a side of any story from somebody who doesn't have Frampton in their name, it's secondhand information, and take that as what you will. Okay, so like a lot of these Workbench videos, we have to start by going back in time. And the Fan Museum actually goes back to Vornado. If you guys are familiar with Vornado, they were a company that made probably the most efficient portable fans mid-century. And then the company was resurrected by a collector named Mike Coop, who was an AFCA member, I think in '89. And he built the first fan museum at the Vornado headquarters in, I believe it was Kansas. And he very sadly lost his entire company in a divorce. He went through a very nasty divorce, and his ex-wife got the company. And she and the people that she then sold, or whatever happened to Vornado after she got it, they weren't interested in the fan museum because it didn't generate profits for the company. So they were going to just get rid of it. And Tom Frampton very generously stepped up and said, I will host it at my company. So they moved the entire fan museum from Kansas to Indiana, from Vornado to Fanimation. I don't remember exactly what year that was. I want to say maybe 2006, mid-2000s maybe. But I actually was invited to the grand opening of the original fan museum at Vornado. I was an AFCA member when I was a kid, and got an invite to that back in the 90s or whenever it was. I didn't go, for starters. I was a kid and didn't have any money or any way there. But I had my own problems with the AFCA. Namely some pedophiles in the organization, as well as just a lot of snobby older fan collectors who didn't think anything other than brass desk fans was worth collecting. And so I wasn't a very popular guy within the AFCA even as a kid. Just a lot of these older collectors are like, what, you want that junk? And I liked box fans and circulators and things like that. No, brass fans only, but I didn't have the money for brass fans, and I didn't grow up in an area where they were common. Not to mention that most of the FCA guys back then weren't even into ceiling fans, and the ones that were liked the ornate early 1900s, late 1800s, stuff that's incredibly rare and expensive. Even like round noses weren't considered to be collectible back then. And I was looking for 70s and 80s stuff, back in the 90s. And so, that was very much, oh no, you should never collect that. It was very much not, there were some good parts of the experience, but it overall was not a great experience. And I already had some enemies within that organization, which we'll come back to in a little bit. So, again, now the Fan Museum is in Indiana, hosted by Fanimation and Tom Frampton. And late 2000s, early 2010s, I'm not sure exactly what year this was, a vintage fan collector that I knew through VintageCeilingFans.com named Jimmy Pickering started what I believe was the first Facebook group for ceiling fan collectors. It only had maybe a dozen members, and he reached out to me and said, can you help me grow this group? So I promoted the group and invited everybody that I knew that was vintage collectors, everybody I knew that was AFCA guys that were into ceiling fans, and everybody that I knew from the ceiling fan industry, which included Tom and Nathan Frampton. And so we grew that group from about 12 members to maybe about 1,000. And it was a discussion for, collectible fans, both antiques and vintage, as well as for within the ceiling fan industry. And in that group, I posted a picture of a Casablanca Centennial that was hanging in a shop window near me. Now, I wasn't particularly interested in the Centennial. I'm more of a K63 Casablanca guy. Plus, I knew that even back then they wouldn't be cheap, and I didn't really have any use for it. But I thought it was cool that it was hanging in a shop window. And I posted that picture, and that, along with some of the other discussions, gave Tom an idea. Because when he had moved the Fan Museum from Vornado to Fanimation, they had sectioned off an area of the warehouse and built that lower level to look very much like it looked at Vornado. But when they did that, they lowered the ceiling, so now it was 2 stories, and the upper story was just empty. And he had an idea that the upper story could be filled with vintage fans to appeal to vintage collectors, and he wanted to start with the ones that were iconic from his time at Casablanca. And so he asked me, he said, could you go and get that? And I said, well, it depends on how much it costs, how much they'd want for it. I don't really have a use for it. He said, no, I have this idea that you could bring that and a few other fans from your collection, and we could start this vintage display upstairs. And I was skeptical because I knew that the museum had a connection with the AFCA, and vintage fans in general, and me in particular, weren't that popular within the AFCA. But he was pretty insistent. So first of all, I went to the store and negotiated with them, and I got it. And Tom and I discussed some other fans that he wanted for the display. Originally, it was just going to be 16 fans. It was going to be early Casablancas, other, early 70s prototypes, just anything unusual and early that would be of interest to vintage collectors. And we picked the 16 fans, most of which were ones that he requested, but a few were ones that I thought were appropriate. And he said, well, I want you to come to Fan Fair in Indiana. Fanimation is hosting it. And I said, well, I don't really do that well with the AFCA guys. He said, no, I'll take care of everything. You'll be there. You'll be my guest. And I didn't know if we were going to be hanging the fans that week or what, but he wanted me to bring my whole family. So I brought my wife and daughter, and he put us up in a hotel and was just a very generous host. And I saw the downstairs fan museum, which was amazing and beautiful. And I saw the upstairs, which was an empty room with a few fans on the ground maybe. And I didn't quite see the potential in it yet. And he had me store the fans on a pallet, and we would make arrangements for me to come and hang them. That was a pretty good experience. I didn't have any bad experiences with him or the AFCA or anybody that was there. He really did a good job of selling me on my involvement. And so we made plans for me to come down there for a week and install the fans that we had picked, 16 fans at this point. Originally, when he'd said, oh, we've got everything there to hang them, they'll be ready to hang, and I got there and the room was no different. It was still an empty room. So we had to frame up the ceiling, and we had to do, figure out mounting and stuff like that. And it ended up taking a week. And the thing that struck me that week, the museum downstairs was beautiful, but it was completely deserted. They had the entire week that I was there were no visitors. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is an amazing place. And there's lots of people in the world that are interested in fans, not to mention people that might not be interested in fans, but just would be interested in a museum that's visually beautiful and interesting. There's so much that we can do to make this more popular, to give this more traffic. And especially if we start focusing on vintage fans upstairs. I had just met Reese, who at the time was very young, and I just found out that there was a whole new generation of kids that were into fans. And I was like, there's no reason this should be deserted. This should be brimming with people. If you want to make money off of it, there should be a way to make money off of it. If you want it to be the way that you give back and nothing costs anything, then there should be a tremendous way to get people in here to give back. But it shouldn't just be sitting here collecting dust with nobody visiting it, because what's the point of that? So I had expressed some of these thoughts to Tom, and it sounded like he was really interested in developing traffic for the museum, as well as developing the upstairs into a vintage fan display. So I went back home and brainstorming and figuring out the next steps. And the only criteria that he gave me is that I couldn't take any pictures of the upstairs, or I could take them, but I couldn't share them, because he did not want the AFCA guys to know what we were doing, because there were still a number of AFCA guys that were very against vintage fans, and to some degree me in particular, and he wanted to keep that quiet. I said, can I put video on YouTube? He said, sure, because I don't think these old AFCA fan collectors are going to be watching YouTube. So that's why the footage of the museum initially was on YouTube, but there were no pictures. So one of the things that we'll talk about is my payment arrangement, because there's been some talk back and forth. Was I paid? Was I a volunteer? And it was definitely an interesting gray area. What would happen was I would turn in my receipts for materials, not fans, not gas, not food, but like if we had to go and buy lumber to hang the fans from, if we had to go and buy wiring, if we had to whatever. And I would turn in my receipts for the materials, and I would get a check from Fanimation, from payroll, that was roughly double the amount of the receipts that I turned in. And so I'm sure what that was supposed to do is that was supposed to cover my food, my gas, my hotel, and have a little something extra for me for being there for the week. So I was technically paid. However, it was not enough to cover everything that I was spending, both those things, food, gas, etc., but also the work that I was missing back home, because I would have to take off a week of work at home to come and go to Indiana for a week. And so at the end of the week, I would end up in the red. And so the way that I did it in my own accounting, I don't know how this was in Tom's head or the payroll department of Fanimation, but the way that I did it in my own accounting is that I was being paid for my labor there, but everything else that I did was volunteer. So I was volunteering for what became the group trips. I was volunteering for anything that I did that wasn't actually me getting on a ladder and hanging fans. And so when I had to pay for hotels and pay for food and gas and things like that, I was including that in my volunteer budget. This is something that I'm doing. And I'm doing this because I want to show Tom how we can get higher traffic in the museum, how we can get the next generation of kids interested in fans. So it's important to note that I was receiving money, but I was also losing money. But I was doing it, again, because I wanted to show Tom that with the right kind of work and the right kind of involvement, we could have visitors to the museum every single day. And what I wanted to show him was that there was this purpose and a point to having somebody like me there, full-time staff, because then we could do a lot of outreach and a lot of hands-on and getting involved with the kids and things like that. And my goal was to show him how valuable I was in that process, so that I would end up being the first full-time staff member of the museum. We had kind of talked about that in the abstract, but we'd never talked about it in specifics. But I thought that if I showed him how good I was at it, that would be a foregone conclusion. And so that's why I was going way overboard and spending a lot of my own money and things like that. At the time, I was working multiple part-time jobs back home, but I had no full-time job that I really loved. I definitely didn't have the barn. So there was nothing really keeping me where I was, and I was willing to move to Indiana if that's what ended up shaping up. And so what I was doing is I was going way overboard. I was giving 110% every step of the way, even though I was losing money. And one of the lessons that I've learned, but not really learned, because this has been a problem for me everywhere that I've worked, is that a lot of places don't want you to give 110%. They say they do, but what they really want is for you to do the bare minimum and do exactly what they're asking and nothing more. When you start going above and beyond, one of two things will happen. Either they will say, oh, well, they're doing more, so let's give them more. Oh, they're doing more, so let's give them more. And then it'll get to the point where it's untenable. Or they'll be like, but this isn't the way that I wanted it. They'd much rather you do the minimum and do it their way. Again, that's a lesson that I've learned repeatedly because I'm somebody who doesn't really know how to do the minimum, but it's definitely something that happened to me there because I was doing above and beyond and trying to prove myself and prove my work and prove my goals and ideas to Tom for what I thought he had the same goals and ideas. And so it was costing me a lot. And the other thing was, and this is what really ended up being problematic, I would repeatedly get asked for more in ways that I didn't think was reasonable. Where we would have a whole plan lined out and I'd be taking off work this particular week and I'd have these particular supplies bought. And at the last minute, I'd have an email from Tom that said, okay, I want to do this differently and I want to do this differently and I want to schedule this differently. And a lot of times that would cause me a lot of problems because if it was schedule-wise, I'd already be taking off work. I'd already have the hotel booked. Sometimes if it was a group trip or things like that, I've had other people's schedules involved. Or if it was supply related, I'd already have the fans picked out and the supplies bought, and now we have to start all over again. And the example that always stands out to me was when we were doing the stairwell fans. We had talked about hanging whatever fans we were going to hang in the regular museum, whatever work we were going to do downstairs, but we were going to add fans to the stairwell because I had hated that, like, you have this beautiful museum downstairs, now the upstairs is shaping up to be really cool, but the stairwell in between is just fluorescent lighting and drywall. It's blah, it's boring, it takes the magic away. So I brought a bunch of fans specifically for the stairwell. And my car was packed, and I used to do like a layer of fans, a layer of blankets, a layer of fans, a layer of blankets, so there'd literally be fans up to the roof of my Corolla, which is the car I had at the time. My car was packed to the point that if you rolled down a back window, fans would fall out. I was on my way to Indiana. Hotel's already booked, schedule's already made, car's already packed, and I got an email from Tom that said I wanted to do all Casablanca fans in the stairwell, and I want a Cambridge, I want a Victorian, I want a New Orleans, I want this, this, and this. I don't have any of those fans with me. I don't even have some of those fans. And I said, well, can we do this a different time? Can we switch them out? Can we do something else? Because I'm already on my way with the car packed to know this is what I want. And so I end up having to turn around, go back to Madison, unpack the car, find what I can find from those fans that I already have. I think I had everything except the Cambridge, but there was one on Craigslist about 45 minutes from me. So I go on Craigslist. Luckily, they'll sell it to me. And I end up turning around and starting out again like a day later. And that seemed unreasonable. And I talked to my wife about it because I'm not somebody, I've been working in music most of my life. And I've done work as an electrician. I've done a lot of things, but corporate America isn't my world. And Fanimation, for all intents and purposes, is a corporation and it's working in corporate America. And my wife has worked in corporate America her whole adult life. And so, I asked her about it and she said, well, honestly, this is what it's like working for a CEO. They have the ideas and then the people directly underneath them, it's their job to implement them. And sometimes the CEO is so far removed from the day-to-day operations that what they're asking isn't reasonable. But if you want to work for that CEO, you have to figure out a way to make it happen, which is fine when you're paid six figures and that's your full-time job and you're working directly for that CEO. But in this case, I was 3 states away, technically getting paid, but also losing money on it. It really wasn't reasonable. So that was kind of the first chink in the armor for me. And it wasn't the first time that happened and it wasn't the last time that happened, but that's the example that I always give. Then, because by this time, word had gotten out, other people had visited, we'd started with the group trips and other things that I was doing to get more traffic. So the word was out now among fan collectors, both vintage, kids, and AFCA, that we now have this growing vintage display at the museum. And so the complaints started. Originally from the AFCA guys complaining both online and directly to Tom that what are you doing? These fans are garbage. These aren't antiques, etc. Plus we hate Dan, as well as from some of the vintage collectors who, as far as I know, were jealous that it wasn't, or they just didn't like me, whatever it was. We started to get complaints both online and directly to Tom about what I was doing. And the complaints would be one of two things. They would be, we don't like these vintage fans in the museum. Vintage fans don't belong in the museum. Or, I don't like this thing Dan posted on Facebook. We even had one parent of a kid that called in to complain, just literally cursing at me and Tom because I had told his kid he was wrong about wiring. And so those complaints started. Again, they initially started with complaints online, then complaints to Tom. Then when that didn't work, they would start taking their complaints further. And my job that I was working back in Wisconsin started getting complaints from fan collectors You know, Dan's doing this, Dan's posting this online, Dan's a scammer, Dan's all these things, trying to get me to lose my jobs in Wisconsin. And again, the example that I always give, and the one that was kind of the last straw for me, was that someone actually, and I'm pretty sure I know who it is, one of the AFCA guys, actually called my wife's job and claimed that I was using her corporate credit card to buy fans for the museum. It was like, wow, these people are really sick that they would try to put my completely unrelated job and my wife's job at risk because I'm hanging some fans.
Another thing that happened that certainly didn't help, the ceiling fan group I was talking about at the beginning, Jimmy added another administrator who ended up removing me, and as a result, a lot of the ceiling fan industry people left, and that group kind of lost its usefulness to Tom and to the museum. And to some degree, that also meant that I lost some usefulness to Tom and to the museum.
And then the next thing that happened was Kim was hired. Now, again, I'd been kind of making my case to Tom that I thought that I could be the first full-time employee of the museum and that I was willing to move to do it. So imagine my shock when they relocated somebody else. My goal right now is to get my whole collection restored and on display. I would be like, oh, absolutely, I'm the wrong guy for the job. If you know somebody that's a good restorer, and there's nobody better than Kim that I know of, then that's the person you need to hire. But that wasn't communicated to me at all. What was communicated to me was we want to grow the vintage display and we want to get more traffic and we want to get more kids involved, etc. So I was pretty surprised when that happened. And again, this is nothing against Kim. I have nothing against Kim. I think he's a wonderful person and everything he's done for the museum has been spectacular. But it was clear that all the extra work I was doing and hoping to prove myself as being hired, nothing was going to come of it. And so at the culmination of all these things, you know, particularly the phone call to my wife's job, but really all of these things, I had had enough. And so I called and asked Tom for a meeting. I made my case at the meeting. Up until now, I had heard nothing negative at all about my work at Fanimation other than these people who were complaining for no reason. Tom and the other people at Fanimation and the other people who were core to the museum had nothing but good things to say about what I was doing. So this wasn't like a meeting where Tom had called a meeting to complain to me about some things. This was a meeting that I asked for to complain to Tom about some things. And what I basically said at the meeting was, look, if I'm going to continue doing this, then I need you to stand up to these AFCA guys and these other guys who are complaining, because they would call Tom and he would call me and he would tell them whatever they wanted to hear and nothing would change, and I would keep getting this hostility. And I said, I can't keep working like this. You don't have my back. I need you to, if I'm going to keep working, then I need you to have my back with these people that are complaining about nothing. And if I'm going to keep working, then I need something more solid in terms of my role here, in terms of my job here, because I can't keep losing money and spending more time and then, you know, having to reschedule and all these things that keep happening. I basically need more support from you. And I thought one of two things would happen. Either he'd say, sure, and we'd work it out, or he'd say no, and then I'd say, okay. Kind of was the second one, but not really. And all I really will say about Tom's response is that if this ever goes to court, and I hope it doesn't, but if it ever goes to court and a recording is played of that meeting, I will get everything that I'm asking for in court. And so I said, okay, let's do 2 more group trips and finish up any projects that I've started. And then you pick who you want to succeed me. And at that summer group trip coming out, I will pass the torch. I will anoint whoever you've picked to succeed me. And then from then on, I will visit and I will be a part of things, but I will no longer be involved in the work or the organization. And that was how we left it that week. And that was, I believe, a January with a winter group trip. And we had a spring one scheduled. And it was along with a week of work to complete projects. And then we had a summer one scheduled, which was going to be my last. And the week of the spring group trip, which I believe was in March, once again, car is packed. I'm on my way. Hotel is booked. And I get an email from Tom changing the schedule. And again, this had been one of my complaints, is that I can't keep rearranging my schedule. So I flat out said, no, I can't do that. The hotel's already booked. the car's already packed. I'm already on my way. If you want to change things, we can change them for the summer. But as it stands right now, I either have to stick with what we've already scheduled or I'm not going to come. And he said, please, I need you to come. I was like, okay, great. Then let's come. Let's stick to the original schedule and we'll change the schedule going forward for summer, which is my last. He said, no, we can't change the schedule. I said, okay, well, I'm not coming. So that week went on without me. None of the work that I was supposed to do got done, but the group's trip still happened, and I believe it went great. I followed up with him a couple weeks later and said, okay, let's figure out the schedule for the summer one. Let's figure out who you want me to pass the torch to. And he replied back and said, I don't want you ever coming back again. And what was sad about that is I'd planned to continue coming back. I'd planned to leave all of my fans in the museum and, continue supporting. I just wasn't going to be involved in the work. But, when he said, oh, you're not welcome anymore, then obviously I don't want to leave my fans somewhere where I'll never see them again. So that's where we ended up, where we are now. Okay, so let's do normal Workbench coverage of Fanimation. Now, this is not information that I have from my time there or from Tom. This is the same way I would research any other Workbench video, by going online, looking at corporate records, looking at advertisements, looking at catalogs, looking at web archives, etc. So all this information comes from there. It's been researched the same way as all of my other Workbench topics. So our origin story starts in 1973, where a teenage Tom Frampton comes to work for Burton Burton, who is an antiques dealer. In 1978, Tom designs the Punkah fan, which was his first original design. In 1981, Burton Burton sells Casablanca. We've had a whole series of Workbench videos on Casablanca and Burton Burton. In 1983, Tom Frampton leaves Casablanca. He left after Burton. He stayed there for a few years and was not happy. In 1984, Fanimation was founded. In 1985, Fanimation Design and Manufacturing Incorporated was incorporated in California by Tom Frampton. In 1986, Tom gets permission to use designs from Casablanca's specialty fan division. Fanimation makes a custom fan for Down and Out in Beverly Hills, which is a movie, which that custom fan becomes the Palisade. Now, I can tell you a few side notes there. One is, so he doesn't get permission from Casablanca to use their designs until 86. So the question I have is, what was he making from 83 to 86? If I had to guess, I'd say he was probably making the same designs without permission, but that's speculation on my part. Obviously, whatever happened worked out fine for him and worked out fine for Casablanca. One thing I do know about that fan for that movie, the Palisade, is originally Tom was making for Casablanca, the Palmetto and the Punkah fans that were long fan systems, like for a restaurant. And for the movie, they just wanted a one-off. And so he had to figure out how to make the same fan, but just as a single, which is what became the Palisade. And then speaking of single, that's still a big room fan with technically two fans on it. In 1990, the literal single version of it, just one fan, like more conventional ceiling fan, the Islander, is introduced. In 1994, Fanimation moves to Indiana. Fanimation Design and Manufacturing is incorporated in Indiana by Tom and Rachel Frampton. 1996 is the first mention of Fanimation in ads. Keep in mind that up until this point, they were mainly a niche dealer, and the Casablanca specialty fan division, which is, what became Fanimation, sold mainly to businesses. And now with the Islander and the Palisade, they can sell to residences, they can sell to homes, designers, etc. So they don't get started mentioning in like newspaper and magazine ads and things like that until 1996. It's the first mention of Fanimation in ads. The three-blade Palisade is introduced at Dan's Fan City, and I remember seeing this as a kid, and I thought it was really cool. I was surprised at how much air it moved, given how slow it went and that the blades were palm leaves. But I remember seeing the three-blade Palisade introduced at Dan's Fan City in Minneapolis. It cost $1,299. It was the most expensive fan that Dan's Fan City sold. Also in 1996, Fanimation Design and Manufacturing becomes Fanimation Inc. In 1997, Fanimation opens new offices in Lebanon, Indiana. In 1998, Fanimation begins appearing at other dealers. Up until now, they were exclusively a Dan's Fan City product. The Islander appears in ads with 5 blades. I'm not sure when they switched from 3 to 5, but it doesn't start appearing in ads until 98. In 1999, Fanimation is now name-dropped in decor magazines as the hottest thing out there. The Fanimation website is introduced. As of this year, which was their big year, the model lineup is the Islander, the Palisade, the Punkah, the Burton Pulley, the Palmetto, the Pedestal, and the Americana. This is also the year of the first Fanimation patent, which is for a narrow palm blade. In 2000, Russ Klingle joins Fanimation and launches an aggressive advertising campaign. Fanimation begins appearing in hundreds of ads in most major dealers. This is the year they have their first Fanimation booth at the Dallas Lighting Market. They are still being sold at Dan's Fan City. The Louvre now appears in ads. The Palisade is now pictured with 4 blades. The Louvre and many other palm blade designs are patented in the year 2000. I actually know Russ Klingle. I didn't know originally that he started at Fanimation. I met him when he was working for Kichler. I don't know who he's working for now. I met him through my work with Kichler, and then found out through him that he started at Fanimation, and he's somewhere else now. But he's a tremendous guy, very knowledgeable, and he was very instrumental in Fanimation's success at this time. 2001, Fanimation sues Dan's Fan City for copying their designs. This was a big story that we've talked about in previous videos. I think some Fanimation videos actually with Tom. It was a huge deal. That he had a deal with Dan's Fan City, and then Dan Sr. passed away, and Dan Jr. was like, well, that deal was with my dad, so who cares about that deal? Let's just copy these designs, make them cheaper, and sell them under our own name. And so, obviously Fanimation sued, and that lawsuit was a clusterfuck, and it did not exactly work out in Fanimation's favor, which I know Tom was still bitter about to the last time I talked to him about it, which obviously was years ago. Yeah, so if you ever get called for jury duty, definitely take it, because you never know, he might be called to decide a fan patent case, and yeah, you could have been the deciding factor on that jury. New for 2001, the Louvre, which has already appeared in ads previously, but it was introduced as new for 2001. The Brewmaster, the Sports Fan series. Also in 2001, they're not officially introduced, but the Enigma and the Palisade are patented. The Palisade obviously was already being sold. The Enigma was being designed. In 2002, Fanimation announces their first recall. The Enigma is officially introduced, and the Hemingway collection of portable fans is introduced. Also new for 2002, the damp location, the Tropicana, and the old Havana. 2003, Fanimation begins construction on new offices in Zionsville, Indiana. Those would be the offices that I have filmed at and where the museum is currently hosted at. Very beautiful office building and warehouse that was built in 2003. Also new for 2003, the Enigma, which was also introduced the previous year, but again, they're pushing it as new for 2003, and the Echelon. In 2004, Fanimation introduces the Phoenix Custom Design Expo fan, where you can pick separate decorative motor housings and blades. The Brewmaster is officially introduced. The Aire Shadow is patented. The Treventi, the Aire, the Sandella are introduced. The logo and website are redesigned. And this is the first year of the One Complete Revolution slogan. That's 2004. In 2005, Fanimation introduces a line of tropical lighting. In 2006, Fanimation introduces a new fan line by designer Lauren Brooks, a partnership with a lighting manufacturer, Hubbardton Forge, and a new line of portable bankers fans. Also 2006 is the official release of the Aire Shadow. In 2007, the website is redesigned again. And definitely, this is the first Workbench video that I've done where website redesigns are relevant, so I think that's kind of cool. In 2008, Fanim Industries is incorporated by Nathan Frampton. If you follow my videos, you know that Fanim Industries was the arm that they used to sell to Lowe's and other lower-end retailers. We talked in other videos about how it's very common for high-end manufacturers to have a lower-end line that was either somewhat lesser quality, or sometimes the exact same quality but sold at a lower price point to mass market retailers. So you'd have fans sold at showrooms at a higher price point, much lower quantity, and then the mass market version. And you don't want the customer to know that you can go to Lowe's and get the same thing that you would pay twice as much for at a showroom. So you have a different name, and in this case that different name was Fanim Industries. And again, this was Nathan's thing. This is Nathan's baby, and he's the one that really took Fanimation from being a niche boutique showroom company to being the huge global player in fans that they are today. So that was incorporated by Nathan Frampton. New fans introduced include the Extraordinaire, the Kubix. I'm probably saying that wrong. It looks the Kubix. I wanted to say Kubix. The Zonix, the Involution, the Solano, and the Huxley. In 2009, Wind Deco is adopted as a trading name of Fanimation. We've talked about trading names as well. The Cumulus, the Torto, the Levon, the Inlet are introduced. 2010, Fanimation is incorporated in California by Nathan Frampton, because now again they're doing much bigger business, so they have to have offices in different states and warehouses in different states and things of that nature. New products include the Multimax, the Mariano, the Ventana, the Quattro, the Benito, the Akira, the Windpoint, the Cancun, and the Aire Decor. 2011 is the first year of DC Motors. New products include the Edgewood, the Keystone, the Landon, the Louvre, and the Maria. 2012, new products include the Extraordinaire, which we've definitely heard before, the Avastin, the Breckenfield, the Camhaven, the Camview, the Crestford, the Genix, the Portbrook, the Stonehill, the Wild, and the Urban Jet. 2013, Fanimation is incorporated in North Carolina by Nathan Frampton. New products include the Odin, the Beckwith, the Embrace, the Pearson, the Kea. Also, that's the first year of LED lights, 2013. 2014, the Brewmaster has a safety recall. New products include the Stafford, the Big Island, and the Kellen. Also, the first year FanSync is introduced. They were on the cutting edge of smart fans. 2015, Fanim Industries is incorporated in California by Nathan Frampton. New fans include the Spitfire, the Mini Breeze, the Zeno, and the Ascension. Mario, who has built the custom fans since Tom stopped doing it himself, retires, which kind of is the beginning of the end for the custom fan line, which was the original Fanimation, which was the original Casablanca specialty fan department. I knew Mario, phenomenal guy and phenomenal craftsman. And Ray, who I also knew, took over for him for a while. 2016, Nathan Frampton becomes president of Fanimation Inc. New logo, new website design. They now offer Fanimation merch, and My Fanimation is introduced. Okay, so after 2016, I'm not going to mention any more new product introductions, because you can go to my videos and see them, because I've made videos at Fanimation up to that point. Plus, you can go on the web and see for yourself. So 2016 is where we're going to stop mentioning the new product introductions. 2020, the website is redesigned again, and in 2021, Tom Frampton is removed from Fanim Industries. Okay, there we have it. This has been a rather long video and comprehensive and covered a lot of things. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope this has answered some questions. I hope this has satisfied the people that wanted to hear my story about the museum, as well as the people that wanted a Workbench video on Fanimation. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. If you have requests for additional content, new Workbench topics, put them in the comments. As always, you can please subscribe anywhere that podcasts are found, because this is also available in podcast version. I think that's everything. Patreon.com/dspiffy. Trying to think. I haven't done one of these in a while, so I'm trying to remember how I used to sign out. I think that covers everything. I have a long list of Workbench topics to work on, but the research is very time consuming and I haven't had a lot of time. Also, sometimes I get stalled in the research. I've been working on a video for Beverly Hills /LA fan company /modern fan company for a long time now, and there's just a couple questions I want answered before I actually sit down and record that video and make it public. And I have been researching and trying to reach out to the right people and have not had any success yet. Eventually, at some point, if I can't get those questions answered, I will just make that video and leave the questions out there, and we can always follow up. But yeah, there's a lot of Workbench topics that have been cooking, but haven't finished marinating yet. So hopefully I'll have time to do some more of these going forward in 2024. So as always, please support our sponsors, Fanstick, Lightstick, Taco Burrito Mexico, etc., rickersheep.com. You know the drill. Regards from Metal Jonas. Patreon.com/thespiffy. Thanks for watching, and please continue to buy Fanstick. Thanks for watching.